All right, welcome to another Bragging Rights. This week we got a hobby progress update. Just a few units that I finished up. We see here some Footsore miniatures crossbowmen. These are from the Pict range, and these are going to go in my cross Irish and Pict army, where I've painted and based the models convincingly enough so they can fit into one army if I ever want to field them together in something like Lion Rampant. But for Saga, I can use the Pict board by throwing in chariots and some mounted models and these crossbowmen, or I can field the Irish when I sub in the warhounds and slingers. These models are pretty great. They're kind of standard fare for Footsore. Pretty good, you know, decent detail, decent variety in sculpt too, which is nice. You got a 12-man unit with actually quite a few unique combinations. We've got multiple guys that are one-ups in the unit, which I always like to see. I also like that the clothing patterns, you know, and what each of them are wearing has a little variety. As you know, you don't expect anybody to show up for the first day of crossbowmanship as a Pict and receive their uniform. You know, this is what these guys would have wore as kind of hunting clothes or day-to-day clothes. I went with mostly earth tones for the palette. I did vary it a little bit away from what I was doing as standard for the Irish, as I wanted them to have a little bit of their own flair. The Pict units have a little more blue than well, the Pict units have blue and the Irish units don't have blue. So that's one of the ways that, at least visually, I'm breaking it up. Otherwise, they're the same. I did forget to put in stones on their bases like I do for the rest of the Irish and Pict force, but that's pretty minor. I just compensated by putting in a little more greenery on there. The crossbows themselves come as separate pieces, and I don't love them. I do need to highlight these crossbows still and try to bring out a little more of the detail with them so they don't just look like dark brown blobs, but it is what it is for the moment. I did another camp for Two the Strongest. So I recently did a camp for my Southern Italian Cleonimus of Sparta army, and that camp I did on a base that was about 100 by 80 millimeters. The standard grids size that I play for Two the Strongest is 100 millimeters by 100 millimeters. So this time I went with a larger base. This is also packed with more tents. This is something that can serve as an early Roman legionary camp. It doesn't have the fortifications built in because I don't always want to field those, so I didn't represent them on the base. I also didn't put my typical things of, you know, animals, servants, supplies, things like that. And the reason why is I wanted to be able to easily balance a unit on top of there. So when a unit occupies the camp, I'm going to stick them on top of the tents like that, just to signify that, because there's no other room to hold a unit with a camp this size. However, with the Romans, I think often I will just leave a small unit of camp servants back there, and they're can be permanently assumed to be in there. So perhaps I'll do a unit that fits and is based specially for this space here, and I'll just stick it in and never move them out of the camp, because raw camp servants don't have a lot of other great uses. Now I'm gonna, I'll go to the unit I just showed. I'm working on a new army. This is going to be a Camillian / Polybian legion. It really leans more towards Polybian, although I'll be playing it in the time period for the Camillian legion a lot more often. I do think that there's a fair bit of overlap. I wouldn't think that everything changed overnight. What I'm collecting right now is primarily centered around 300 BC to 275 BC. So this would be a little later in that period. Velites like this, I think would be the later portion of it, especially with like kind of the uniform of all having wolf skins and having shields as well. The earlier period would have more of a levy javelin men field. For this Roman project, I'm trying to stick as close as possible to 100% Old Glory for the miniatures. Of all the Old Glory miniatures that I've done so far, these are the coolest sculpts. There's only 2 of them. It'd be nice to have more variety, but I really do find these guys kind of cute. They're like on the way to a furry convention, it looks like. The Old Glory nice parts are the price. If you're a member, I think it's called like the Old Glory Legion or something like that, or the Old Glory Army. If you're a member, there's a nice price point, and they cover the periods that I'm most interested in. And there's some nice detail too. It comes and goes on the miniatures, but these ones have some nice detail, and I think a lot of the individual models do as well. Pitfalls are, man, it's a lot of lead. So, there's a little bit of a danger, I would assume, to working with it. It's really hard to order. You have to do so on faith because the pictures are horrendous where they exist. If you reach out to Old Glory, while they are nice people, they won't tell you what the units look like, what they're suitable for, send a picture, things like that. So really can't recommend it from that perspective. The models are very bendy, but unlike pewter, they bend right back in place without really sacrificing much, it seems to me. And another pitfall is everybody's in the same exact walking position. Same leg out, same leg back, leaning forward. And I mean everybody. So everybody's in lockstep across an entire army. I don't like that. That really takes away from the variety once you notice it. But they're inexpensive. I had them, and even though I would have preferred to paint up a different army, I went with these ones. These are based to the strongest, bat bases. I love them. And I'll show you something cool with that base in a moment. Next up, we've got Legion Command. This is just from the command pack for Old Glory. It comes with two guys on either side, like Principe looking guys. I clipped them both off and just made this a 3-man unit on a bat base. This is going to be a command for probably 2 Legion, 2 Velites, and maybe 1 skirmishing archer unit. I had one of those extra Principes, so I've done him up as a hero model. Could also be used as a counter of some sort. For hero models, unfortunately, bat bases doesn't make hero bases, so I always just clip up a small 15mm circle. And here was the motivation behind getting these started and not using my previous Roman army, which I'm not sure I showed off here, but I could show it off eventually, is I wanted to base using 2 of the strongest quincunx rules, which are 1 massive base that holds your Hastati, your Principes, and your Triarii all together, instead of having them individually based in 3 different units like most other systems, and like I have mine based. So here it is in all her glory. So this is a unit of a legion, essentially, of Old Glory miniatures for 2 of the strongest. Once it comes back around, I do like the way these guys look from the behind a lot more than the front. So in the front, we've got 2 ranks of Hastati. Hastati would be the less armored, younger, less wealthy troops of the Legion during this time period, plebeian, Camillian Romans. Principes, probably a little more veterancy, certainly have better equipment and more experience. And the far back are the Triarii. They would be think of it as the elite corps in terms of age, experience, and wealth. They would have the best equipment. They also would likely have the least chance of dying in battle as they stay back and observe for much of the battle. I started by using the types of spears that Old Glory sells, because these Triarii do come open-handed. I did need to drill them. It wasn't that much of a pain. I didn't really lose many hands doing it. I use the spears that Old Glory sells. They're pretty bad. They are extremely tough metal. To clip through them, you need something very heavy duty. Typical wire snips or typical, hand plier cutters are not going to cut it. So that was kind of annoying. I actually ruined a pair of clippers, which I use for pretty much all purposes, including clipping wire spears. I ruined a pair. It just tore through the blade. So then I've only done 1 so far. Back here, you can see it doesn't color match. One of the spears didn't make the trip from primer to paint, and I had to replace it. I replaced it with a broomstick spear, and that's going to be my standard from now on. They're lighter, more flexible, easier to work with, and you can shape a spear point, which I'm going to do for future units. For these ones, I just painted on the spear points. I'm not sure that going to keep this unit quite the way it is. I could rebase it in the future. Part of me wanted to base these, in smaller bases that I could work with and still have the quincunx effect, and I'll demonstrate. Originally, this was to be my Hastati unit. Right behind it here would have been my Principes, and then the Triarii would have been a small unit in the back. The reason why I do this is because the quincunx rules for To the Strongest say, after the Hastati fall back, the Principes take up the front line. After the Principes fall back, the Triarii take up the front line. And so you can actually change the models in the front line. With this large unit, I'm just going to indicate who's in the front line as opposed to change that. Also, quincunx rules, and this was Battle of the Great Plains demonstrated this. Scipio detached his Triarii into units to go fight on their own, which quincunx rules do allow for. My unit base like this isn't going to allow for it. However, what this unit base like this does accomplish is a big, intimidating block of infantry. Also, this is something that I discovered as I was playing with the bases. These bases are the only ones that do so out of this range of To the Strongest bat bases, but they perfectly fit with each other and just form this nice little block. And it almost perfectly, not quite, but almost perfectly fits within one grid square. It overlaps just a little bit, but it's manageable just a little bit. So this is, I think, going to be the standard for the rest of this Roman army. We'll see. The Allied Campanian legions, which alternatively will be used fighting against Rome, during the time period that I'm most interested in, and some of the wars and battles then, that's going to be probably individually based, like I just showed. So I'll have 2 legions based like that, and then I'll have 4 to 6 legions based like this. And I think that should give me enough flexibility to be okay. The goal is to also have enough troops to, I want to be able to fight these battles for the time period I'm really interested in. But B, I also want to be able to host a mega battle where I take my old-based Romans, my old-based Epirote army, and then pair it with my new base Cleonymus Sparta army and my new based Romans, and just have this 9-foot table for 10 millimeter and just do a really great mega battle for something like Asculum or Heraclea. That would just be really rad. All right, I think that's all the painting that I really got done this week. Maybe I had actually I do have a few other things real quickly. I have almost forgot. I have a Wandering Bard for Saga. This is a Welsh bard from Footsore Miniatures. It's really a later time period. It's medieval Welsh. It's meant to be part of their Baron War or something like that. War of the Barons. It's supposed to be part of the Baron Wars range and supported with that. But I just thought it was a really cool model, and what are you going to use for an Irish Wandering Bard? I think this guy works pretty well. The reason I'm thinking of taking an Wandering Bard for Saga is that he's a 0-point hero, and he makes your Warlord pretty nasty in close combat. And with the Irish, I want to use the Warlord with a banner and put him up in the face of my enemy as quickly as possible. And the Irish have multiple abilities that key off of your heroes. And this gives you 1 bonus hero without spending any points. So I thought because of that it was worth it. In some ways he weakens your Warlord, but I think that's counterbalanced by what he does with the Irish Warlord. Okay, so these are 4 Berserker models from Gorgon Miniatures. This is an older line of Vikings that they carry. They're a little bit weedy, maybe just a little bit shorter than Footsore and a little bit bulkier. Just a little more, thickly proportioned, but they fit nicely enough. I think they're okay. They're going to go with my Footsore kind of generic Norse army. I'm using it for Norse Gales, for England Danes, and for Vikings. And these Berserkers are really what's going to sell it for the when I field them as Vikings, and just a really fun unit. I did use some striped pants. I would have preferred to have more stripes instead of having big thick stripes like that. But I wasn't really in the mood to go back and redo anybody based on, this is just a models I will very rarely use. And of course, I threw in my yellow and blue, as I try to do in as many painting projects as possible. And finally, we have, and I probably shouldn't even show this yet because I haven't quite finished it, but we have here a blood eagle. I'm going to use this as an objective marker for the Vikings. The one thing that it's missing, because it has to wait until it gets a dull coat first, is the blood. I'm going to do a lot of blood effects back here and pooled around the feet, things like that. I'm going to wait until after I've applied the dull coat though, as I want to make sure that I have that gloss shine on the blood to show that it's wet, All right, that's it for this week. Thanks a lot. Talk to you later.